Alright, so the next thing is we're going to learn how to animate our text in Adobe After Effects. So to start animating our text, you have to create a composition. I've just shown a very quick way to create a composition. For example, you can come all the way here and you can click create a composition and you can just give your details. For example, you can see text animation. And then you can specify the other basic properties like the aspect ratio, the presets you can check from here, and all that's the frame rate, the start time code usually at 0, and then the duration that it's going to take. Usually you can leave it at the default one. For example, in this case we are going with 30 seconds, which is quite okay for me. And you can define the background from here as well if you want, but for now, let's say we are creating a composition from this. You can say okay. There are two ways you can create a composition. You can create like that, or you can come to composition over here and say new composition, and it will do the same way. Okay, so this is text animation. So the first thing you need to do before you start bringing in text is to make sure you get your workspace very nicely prepared. Okay, so the top right over here, there are a bunch of features that you actually don't need to conduct all your editings in Adobe After Effects, especially when dealing with text. For example, you have info over here, you have audio properties over here, you have preview. We may need it because sometimes when the system got slower, if you are working on a system that is a bit slow and it start to lag, you can change the resolution from here. From automatic, you can make it half, third, or quarter accordingly. Okay, so we're going to need preview, and then we have the effects and presets. Okay, we are going to need effects and presets, and then we have libraries. We don't need libraries, and we need characters because we are going to deal with text. We need characters and we need paragraph. We need all these, and we don't need tracker actually at this point, and we don't need content fill at this point. So we can just click to remove, close panel. And then we can come to info as well, close panel, and we can come to audio. We don't need all this at this point. Close the panel, and we can have preview. I said we need preview, and then we have effects, library. We don't need library, so we can just come over here and close it. And then so what we need is characters, paragraphs, and maybe effects, okay, and preview. So for us to have it fully opened, you can just drag on character, bring it down over here, and just release it, and you can see it is opened. And you can have a paragraph also. You can just grab it and bring it down over here. You can release it, so you can see it is open right now. And then you can have maybe your effects, drag it down here, and you can release it, and you can see the effects over here. So all the things that we need are actually opened over here, so it makes our work pretty fast and easy to work on. Okay, so you can bring this down here, and then we can have the character and paragraph. Very close attention because these are what we need when we are dealing with text. So the first thing we need to do, or we need to start, is to just double click on this rectangle tool to create the fill that we need. For example, if you don't have, or you don't like the color you have on the fill, you can always come over here, click and select the color according to your brand, or according to what you're working on, or what you want to actually work on directly. So you can just go ahead and select and change the color accordingly. Right now I like this color, so I'm going to go with it. Then we have the stroke by the side over here. So stroke is what you have by the side. You can just click on this and you can enable it or disable however you want it. Okay, you can enable or disable the stroke, and then you can see the properties over here. You can increase or decrease the stroke width. So right now I don't want it, so I can remove it, or you can increase it or decrease it accordingly. I don't need the stroke for this text animation, so I just remove it. And the next thing is to start adding text to this our canvas. So to add a text, I usually use the command T to enable the text tool. Okay, so I just click on this, and then I can start typing my text. For example, epic mentorship. I want to write epic mentorship, but I have written epic, so I need to duplicate this. I select the text down here. You can see it over here. I can just hit on command D to duplicate this, and now I can move this text around to another point, or I can bring it down and say mentorship. I can double click now and write mentorship. Okay, so this is very nice. So you can see we can select both of them at the same time. A very quick thing that I want to share with you is people often ask me, how do you easily click out from text in Adobe After Effects? because right now if you try to move out or you try to click somewhere, you are going to start a new text. So what I usually tell people is the first and the best way to click out of the text in Adobe After Effects is just to come into the timeline over here and just click on it, or you can hold the command and enter to move out of text, and you can always hit the letter V to return to the selection tool, and then you can move the text accordingly. Okay, so you can centralize them accordingly. You can just move them around to make sure they are centralized easily, and you can use the X and Y axis as well, and you can worry about the text properties. For example, the font style, you can see different kind of fonts from here. You can select from the various font styles that we have. The text color, you can change the color as you so wish from here. You can just select on any color and change accordingly. And then you have the sizing. Okay, you can play around with the size. You can increase or decrease the size accordingly. Just play around with it. There's so much to look at, so much to learn and play around with around here. So just try to look at these properties and see how you can edit and come out with the best feature that you have possible. So one thing you will need to pay attention to also when you are moving a text, is better to hold down the shift key, so it enables you to move vertically and horizontally in a very professional way. So holding down the shift key can help you in movement of the text very nicely. Okay, so this is basically how to bring in text and add it into the canvas. Okay, so let's try to see what kind of animations you can put so that your text can look kind of professional and nice. To some people it's very basic. They can put in some very boring things like opacity to make their text stand out or to create an animation. So what they do is they just create keyframes. I've shown in the previous video on how to create keyframes. So to create a keyframe, what people used to do is to just come over here, for example, and then they come back here and hit on opacity, letter T, and they bring out the opacity. So at this point, they say this is the highest point. This is where they want the opacity to be 100 at 100, and then they just hit on opacity on the two text. Okay, so this is the first text, and then this is the second text. So they create an opacity over here at 100, and then they bring it down to 0, and then 0 the opacity. Okay, at this point they 0 it, they move it down to 0, right, to 0 and to 0 as well. Okay, so when you start moving them, you can see the opacity moves from 0. The text can come in from 0 to 100, something like this. You can see the coming up from 0 to full 100. Okay, and I think this is very boring. You can put in some dynamic animations to make it pretty interesting and fast and enticing. So what you need to do is select these keyframes and delete them, letter D to delete, and then you can come over here. Assuming I want to put some keyframes, what I usually use is I use positions. So position, letter P to enable the position keyframes, and then you can just enable the, at this point maybe I want them to be 100 and 100 at this point, and then you can move down to the beginning, and over here to create the keyframes you can just select the image and select the text and maybe drag it up over here outside of the canvas, and then you can come down here as well and select it and move it outside the canvas depending on what kind of directions you want to have it. So I want it to come from the outside and then they will meet at the inside. Okay, so let's try to have a preview, because now the movement have created the keyframes. You can see them over here, the two keyframes, they've already been created. So let's try to play it and see how the text is going to behave with these two position keyframes enabled. I think you can see it coming from the outside and it's coming pretty slow. If you want it to be pretty fast, you select the two keyframes and move them closer so they move a bit faster. So let's try it one more time to see. You can see they move a bit faster, but this is too robotic and not that interesting because they move in together and they stop together at the same time. Epic mentorship. I think we can put some animations to make it a bit interesting and very nice, because this one right now, let's try to look at the graph. Come over here, click on this graph and let's try to look at it. For example, you can come back and let's say we are trying to look at the graph of the of only the epic. Okay, epic over here. Let's try to look at its graph. Okay, so you select the keyframes and then you can come to the graph and you can see the movement. It just move directly at this frame rate, okay, about 500 frame pixels per second, and then it just move down to 0. Okay, you just look at the speed. this fast and then move down to 0. I think this is too linear, and just make sure for you to view this graph, you come over here and make sure you are on the speed graph over here. So for you to make it a bit dramatic and interesting, you can just come back, select the 2 keyframes, for example the epic one, and then you right click on it, and then you can come to keyframe assistant, and then you can go to easy ease. Okay, that's what I usually use, easy ease. Easy ease means it's going to ease in with some animation and come in pretty fast. And let me show you from the graph now, you understand what I'm talking about. So what it does is it moves from 0 and pretty fast to this high speed, and then it slows down to this stopping point over here. I think this is pretty nice, and to make it much better, but let's have a preview of it first to have an idea of what we are talking about. Okay, so pay attention to the epic, how it comes in from 0 to pretty fast speed to the highest speed, and then dies down to 0. Okay, you can see it pretty fast, the epic. Okay, so let's try to make it dramatic a bit by selecting the epic again. Okay, and then coming back to the graph, and then come back over here, select this small dot, and you can come and move these to the left to kind of dramatize it. And you can see the movement, it moves pretty slowly fast to the peak, and then it gradually dies down, come down to 0 in a very dramatic way. So let's try to have a preview again and see what it does. Okay, it's just the epic. Pay attention to the epic. Okay, look at it. Yeah, you can see the slowing in terms of the stopping. Okay, let me do that again. You can see it comes pretty fast and then it stops, while the mentorship comes in as a robot. Okay, so you can do that the same thing for the mentorship, because in easy ease there's a shortcut key. You can create a shortcut key on the easy ease. You can do that by just coming to edit button over here, go down to your keyboard shortcut. You can come over here to search the shortcut key for easy ease. Okay, so you can see it over here. Easy ease usually is F9 if you have F9, and F9 is on the other side of my keyboard. So I personally created this Shift plus E to enable the easy ease. Okay, you can create yours also if you want, but I think Shift E also is pretty interesting. So you can have easy ease as Shift E, and then you can close. So to apply that to the mentorship part, you just select the keyframes and just hit on Shift E to apply the easy ease. So it becomes very easy for you to apply easy ease with just this shortcut. Okay, so you apply easy ease, and let's try to see both of them at the same time. You can see the dramatic coming in and stopping in the dramatic or graphical way. Okay, this is pretty fast, and then they slowly stop together. Okay, so you can do that. You can do the same for both of them at the same time. So let's try to undo the easy ease. Okay, of what we have done. You can select all of them at the same time, all the keyframes. You can come all the way, select both of them. You can select both of them at the same time, right click, and then come to keyframe assistant, and then you can come to easy ease, or you can use the shortcut key to apply it to both of them. And then you want to play around with the graph, you can just come down to this graph editor, and then select this tool, and then drag the two of them at the same time. Okay, can drag the two of them and they have the same effect at the same time. So let's go back and try to have a last preview. Okay, so let's have the preview, and you can see dramatically coming out. So one thing that I usually add to my text to stand out, to make it much better and interesting, is I add the what we call the motion blur. Okay, motion blur. Right now at any given point along the way before it hits the ending point, you can see the text very clearly. Okay, but when you attach motion blur, it becomes much more professional. The movement becomes dramatic and very professional. Okay, so I add the motion blur. You can add motion blur by coming over here to enable motion blur, and you can come to the text. You can just click on this to enable the motion blur, and you can enable for both of them the motion blur. So you can see that by trying to move these features, you can see a little bit of the blurry nature, as if you have some blurry nature in your eyes. Okay, and that is the motion blur, just to show you how fast and very professional it can come in and stop. So let's try to have it one more time. You can see it. Yeah, so this is it, and I think this is kind of professional and nice. So all you need to do, you can be very creative with Adobe After Effects. It all boils down to you, what you want to use it for, but this is the most basic tutorial in terms of editing text and adding very key animations to it to look and appear professional. But I think for this tutorial, that does it for adding text and putting some animation. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.